Friday, 6 September. Already, almost a week into the month of September. Welcome to the President's Daily Brief. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. All right, let's get briefed. First, reporting from Israeli intelligence suggests that the leader of Hamas is planning his escape from Gaza, with a report claiming that the terror leader will try to use the Gaza-Egyptian border to smuggle himself and the remaining hostages to Iran. Sounds about right. The Hamas terrorist leader trying to save his own skin by making a break for Tehran and the comforting snuggles of his sugar daddy. Later in the brief, the Putin regime is threatening retaliation against American media following the Biden administration's sweeping crackdown on Russian media executives for attempting to interfere in the U.S. presidential election. Plus, Russian President Putin is once again floating the possibility, supposedly, of peace negotiations with Ukraine. But as in the past, the rhetoric appears to be aimed at undermining Western support for the war effort. And in today's back of the brief, we'll have an update on the ongoing upheaval in Haiti as the U.S. considers sending a UN peacekeeping operation to try and put an end to rampant gang violence that's been gripping the nation since late February. But first, today's PDB Spotlight. I want to begin with a bombshell report out of Israel that suggests that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, may be planning to escape from Gaza to Iran with hostages in tow, fearing that the end is near for his terror regime. According to an exclusive report from the Jewish Chronicle, Sinwar intends to use the strategic Philadelphia corridor along the Gaza-Egyptian border to smuggle himself, fellow Hamas leaders, and the remaining hostages, first to the Sinai Peninsula and then from there to Iran. Now, this plan appears to be the motive behind Hamas's insistence that Israeli forces must withdraw from the strategic Philadelphia corridor as part of any temporary ceasefire agreement. Israel reportedly learned of Sinwar's intentions during a recent interrogation of a senior Hamas official, and further details were discovered from documents seized during operations in Gaza last Thursday, August 29th, and that's the same day that Israel recovered the bodies of 6 hostages executed in cold blood by Hamas. Israeli intelligence reportedly believes that Sinwar feels that the walls are closing in and that abandoning the battlefield and fleeing Gaza is the only way to save his skin. He reportedly views the Philadelphia corridor as his last option to escape. As we discussed on yesterday's PDB, that corridor, the Philadelphia corridor, is a narrow strip of land just approximately 100 yards wide and under 9 miles in length that runs along Gaza's western border with Egypt, and it's long been used by Hamas to smuggle weapons into the enclave. Now, Israeli forces seized the corridor back in May, discovering more than 150 tunnels which Sinwar would likely use for his escape to Iran. Now, while Israeli intelligence has long tried to target Sinwar, the IDF has been unable to strike due to the risks posed to the hostages. Sinwar has been hiding inside Hamas's extensive tunnel network ever since the aftermath of the brutal 7 October attacks. A report last week from the Jewish Chronicle said that Israeli intelligence believes that Sinwar has surrounded himself with 22 of the remaining 104 hostages, holding them in handcuffs and using them as human shields against any potential Israeli assault on his location. Yeah, because nothing says fearless terrorist leader like hiding behind a bunch of helpless captives. The news of Sinwar's alleged escape plan broke Thursday morning following an evening address from Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, who warned, quote, "If we leave the Philadelphia corridor, it will be impossible to prevent Hamas not only from smuggling weapons, but also from smuggling hostages," end quote. Now, later on Thursday, Netanyahu denied media reports that Israel and Hamas were close to reaching a ceasefire agreement. He noted that Hamas continues to act in bad faith, pointing to their latest request to significantly increase the number of Palestinian prisoners released as part of the deal. Officials suggested Hamas is likely just biding their time. It appears that the Biden administration in the U.S. has also finally come to the realization that Hamas is probably not serious about pursuing a meaningful ceasefire and hostage exchange. Really? They're just realizing that? An anonymous White House official told Axios that Hamas's execution of the 6 hostages, quote, called into question Hamas's willingness to do a deal of any kind, end quote. All right, coming up next. The Putin regime is threatening retaliation against American media following the U.S. Justice Department's bombshell charges against Russian media executives for attempting to interfere in the U.S. presidential election. Plus, Russian President Putin is once again floating the possibility of peace negotiations with Ukraine, though the rhetoric appears aimed, as usual, at undermining Western support for the war. We'll have those stories when we come back. Welcome back to the PDB. Now, the Putin regime is vowing to retaliate against American media after the Biden administration unveiled sweeping measures on Wednesday, cracking down on Russian assets and media entities attempting to interfere in the upcoming presidential election. As we covered on yesterday's PDB, the U.S. Departments of Justice and Treasury announced parallel actions that included a slew of sanctions, indictments, and the seizure of dozens of web domains that are being used by the Kremlin to spread disinformation to U.S. voters. The most notable action was a federal indictment against 2 executives at the state-owned media outlet RT, formerly known as Russia Today, for conspiring to commit money laundering and violating the Foreign Agents Registration Act in their quest to divide the American public. Now, Russia's foreign ministry wasted no time in responding, issuing a statement Thursday warning that their response would be swift and would make, quote, everyone shudder. Oh, we're all going to shudder. Kremlin officials painted the U.S. actions as an attempt to purge dissenting voices from the Western media landscape and conjure up fears that Russia is a global bogeyman lurking around every corner. And that's according to a Reuters report. So wait. In case you missed it, let me just repeat that. Okay, Putin's Kremlin is accusing the U.S. of purging dissenting voices. So the Kremlin, unironically, is accusing the West of silencing dissenting voices. I mean, at least the West isn't poisoning or terminating dissenting voices. I'm sure that Litvinenko and Skripal and Navalny and a host of others would see the irony in Putin's accusation. A spokesperson for Russia's foreign ministry said, quote, when the authorities resort to such primitive ways of influencing their voters, this is the decline of liberal democracies, end quote. The official further warned that attempts to expel Russian journalists from the U.S. or obstruct their work in any way would prompt Moscow to respond in kind, becoming the basis, quote, for taking symmetrical and or asymmetric retaliatory measures against the American media. Now, despite their threats and denials, however, the sprawl of Russia's influence operation in the U.S. is well documented and undeniable. For example, RT is accused of laundering $10 million into a Tennessee-based media company that published and disseminated content favorable to the Kremlin. They boosted the visibility of their content by paying allegedly unwitting high-profile American media influencers to spread their narratives on U.S. social media. In another example, the DOJ seized a total of 32 domains being used in a separate Russian influence campaign dubbed Doppelganger. The domains were used to impersonate legitimate news entities, tricking users into thinking that they were visiting a trusted outlet. That operation was geared towards reducing U.S. support for Ukraine and stirring fear among conservative voters in key swing states. While U.S. officials said the Russian-backed influence operations are promoting a Trump presidency, Russian President Putin claimed Thursday that Moscow's preferred candidate was actually Vice President Kamala Harris. Trolling the international press, Putin said, quote, our favorite, if you can call it that, was current President Mr. Biden, but he was removed from the race, and he recommended all his supporters to support Ms. Harris. Well, we will do so. We will support her. Putin added, quote, she laughs so expressively and infectiously that it means that she is doing well, end quote. The Harris campaign dismissed the remarks, saying Russia's preference for a Trump presidency was clear. My God, where is U.S. politics going? Meanwhile, former President Trump responded later on Thursday, saying, quote, I don't know if I'm insulted or he did me a favor, end quote. Okay, let's keep our focus on Russia. where Putin has expressed an apparent openness to resuming peace negotiations with Ukraine. Now, the timing of Putin's remarks is notable, of course, as they come just ahead of Ukrainian President Zelensky's visit to the U.S., designed to secure more military aid. Speaking at the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok on Thursday, Putin reiterated his supposed willingness to engage in peace talks with Ukraine, but emphasized that any future negotiations would need to be based on the Istanbul talks from 2022, terms that Kyiv has already dismissed as unworkable. The Russian leader stated, quote, "Are we ready to negotiate with them? Well, we never refused, but not on the basis of some ephemeral demands, rather on the basis of the documents which were agreed on and actually initialed in Istanbul." End quote. Now, nothing was agreed upon or initialed in Istanbul. The Istanbul negotiations occurred shortly after Moscow's full-scale invasion. The draft treaty allowed Ukraine to pursue EU membership, but prohibited it from joining NATO. The treaty also imposed stringent conditions forbidding Ukraine from hosting foreign weapons and requiring reductions in its military force. Kyiv rejected these terms as unacceptable, leading to the collapse of the talks. Now, Putin's remarks, while directed at Ukraine, are likely meant for Western leaders who, in their minds, are increasingly weary of the economic and political toll of supporting Ukraine. Keir Giles, a Russia expert at the Chatham House think tank, noted that Putin's comments were likely intended to project Russia in a conciliatory light. Of course, that's how you would always imagine Putin, a conciliatory light, while casting Ukraine as the intransigent party. Meanwhile, Zelensky is focused on his upcoming U.S. visit, which he's described as crucial for Ukraine's war effort. During a recent press conference, Zelensky emphasized that his military strategy depends heavily on securing additional weapons and support from President Biden and the U.S. Congress. Zelensky seeks more advanced weaponry that would enable Ukraine to launch more effective counterattacks, including deeper strikes into Russian territory. Now, despite recent struggles on the Eastern Front, Ukraine's incursion into Russia's Kursk region has temporarily shifted the war's narrative. But Putin has downplayed the strategic impact of the attack. According to the Russian president, Ukraine's incursion failed to halt Russia's advances in eastern Ukraine and instead overstretched Kyiv's defenses. Putin stated Thursday, quote, "The enemy's goal was to make us nervous, force troop movements, and stop our offensive in key areas like the Donbass. But it did not work," end quote. The Russian leader further claimed that his forces are now making faster territorial gains, controlling around 18% of Ukrainian territory, including parts of the Donbass region, a primary objective for Moscow. As for Ukraine, President Zelensky maintains that the operation in Kursk is part of a broader strategy to wear down Russian forces and extend the war onto Russian soil. While the long-term impact of this tactic is uncertain, Ukraine's leadership has indicated its intent to hold on to its gains in Kursk for as long as possible. All right. Coming up in the back of the brief, we'll bring you an update out of Haiti as the U.S. considers sending a UN peacekeeping operation to try and stop ongoing violence after gangs plunged the troubled nation into chaos back in late February. We'll have the details after the break. In today's back of the brief, the U.S. is weighing the launch of a United Nations peacekeeping operation in Haiti as concerns grow over a Kenya-led mission that is, frankly, struggling to curb the country's rampant gang violence. As we've previously reported on the PDB, efforts to stop the violence in the Haitian capital and beyond include the June deployment of 400 Kenyan police officers, but the mission, well, it remains severely underfunded. It's supposed to involve police and soldiers from several other nations for a total of 2,500 personnel at an estimated cost of $600 million. Those are inflated UN numbers. But so far, the mission has only received $68 million in voluntary contributions through the UN. While the mission has made some progress, gangs still exert considerable power as a result of their February revolt against the ruling government, controlling 80% or so of the capital, Port-au-Prince. The U.S. and Canada currently provide the bulk of the mission's financial backing, but the reliance on voluntary contributions, of course, is unsustainable. During a Wednesday press briefing, U.S. Assistant Secretary for Western Hemisphere Affairs, Brian Nichols, confirmed that a UN-backed peacekeeping mission is, quote, one of the ways that the U.S. is considering to bolster the operation. Such a move, however, would require a vote from the UN Security Council, and that's a step fraught with challenges, given the troubled history of the UN interventions in Haiti. The last peacekeeping mission was marred by a cholera outbreak traced to UN personnel and reports of sexual abuse, casting doubt on whether a new deployment would garner local or international support. Now, compounding these external challenges are political obstacles within Haiti itself. A major corruption scandal has erupted involving members of the Transitional Presidential Council, with 3 council members accused of soliciting bribes totaling over $750,000 from the director of the country's National Bank of Credit, who has since resigned. Now, the accused deny wrongdoing. Well, that's not a surprise. But the scandal has further delayed efforts, of course, to stabilize the country. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Haiti, meeting with the Haitian Prime Minister and council members to discuss the formation of a provisional electoral council. That's a critical step toward organizing long overdue elections and restoring political order. If the UN Security Council approves a peacekeeping mission, it would represent a major shift in the international approach to attempting to stabilize Haiti. But whether such a mission gains approval and support from both the Security Council and the Haitian people, well, that obviously remains to be seen. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Friday, 6 September. Now, if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And as a reminder, to listen to the show ad-free, well, you know the drill. Become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. And don't forget, if today is Friday, and I have it on good authority that it is Friday, that means that this evening on the First TV at 10 p.m., well, it's a new episode of our extended weekend show, the PDB Situation Report. We've got great guests, lots of insight and analysis, and so hopefully you'll tune in. Again, the First TV, 10 p.m. Friday evenings, and it's also available on our YouTube channel at President's Daily Brief, and of course, all the podcast platforms where you get your podcast stuff. And finally, as you may have read in all the major daily newspapers, remember newspapers? Today marks 1 year since I took on the responsibility and the honor, frankly, of hosting the President's Daily Brief. And on behalf of the entire PDB team, I want to say thank you to all of you for taking a few minutes out of your day each day to tune in. I very much appreciate it. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, well, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.